Okay, so we continue explore the make, and in this video we're going to talk about the connections. What is the connection, why it's important. Also we'll touch the webhooks, mail hooks, and filters of our make. So let's start with the connections. You actually have them in a section here, right? So if you click here, if you have any connections, all of them will be listed here. So as you see, it's convenient to manage them and see what exactly connection you have. We're going to touch this section in a short time, just because we need to understand what exactly connection. So if you and you will definitely have scenarios that use some services, right? So you will need to connect to them somehow. So this let's say the scenario, let's find something, the more services. This will be a simple one, Gmail and Google Sheet, right? It also has some additional modules in it. So, and when you just start with a module, you will have option to select a connections if you have them, or you will have just empty one, so to create it. So if I, let's say we'll select some service that I haven't used yet, like let's say QuickBooks, for example. They definitely do not have the QuickBooks in this one, so you will be able to see something like this, and you will be given a choice to start and create a connection for a particular module. So what you need to remember and understand that first there are several types of the connections, and if service allows several types of them, such as the email, technically if a module, to be precise, right? Because it's more about how the module built on make rather than service itself. So if the module allows you to select several options of the connection, you will be able to select it, right? They might have several different parameters, and so, and in most of the cases, all connections will have option to enter your client in a secret. So this is definitely related to OAuth2 connection, which is several step process when you exchange your code received. Usually it's a code connection, right? When you exchange your code received after consent screen to a token. So once again, if I will start this process, even for the Gmail, it's a little bit different, right? So that one requires from you have your own module, right? So if I will start that, you will be, I will be given a choice and will need to authorize my access to some service, and after that, make will get the code, will exchange it to a token, and so, and that will happen automatically. This is in case for OAuth2 connection. But if I won't, and it's actually exactly an example with a Google Restrict, I have to enter my own client in a secret, right? So you remember, if you created the connection for free Gmail, you have to enter this your own client in a secret. So you have to create your developer application to enter it. Okay. If we go with something simpler, right? I believe the ManyChat, for example, will be the one that has just API key. So super simple, just API key or access token or whatever you choose, right? So you just enter in here, click save, and connection created. This way more easier. But for OAuth, it's more complicated. Also, what you need to remember and understand, we already touched that question, right? This question of scopes. So if I will select some module that I haven't used for that particular module yet. So for example, let's try move folder, and I will select some connection that I might never use it. Yeah. So you see, I will be giving that kind of tip, or I will ask actually to do what? To extend my permission. So what you need to understand that when you create a connection, actually, right? So you will provide some permissions for your account. And if I select that, for example, that go this way, and you see like read and compose, send, permanently deleted all emails and so, right? So that's just the one thing that I allow the, in this case, Integromat application or Make application or whatever application it will be here, even my application, right, to do. But if I will decide to do something different with the same connection, because this is also a Google connection, right? And if I create it for emails, for example, and then I will select to move folders for Google Drive, which requires from me the permission to manage folders, right? Create them, remove them, maybe move, separate one, probably just edit folders. In the case of a Google, I have to click on this one and I need to, will go and extend my permissions for the Google. So I will select an account, right? And that's just because it's not authorized app. I will need to go this way. Anyways, I have this one, right? So Integromat already has access to access and so on. And I need to trust and extend my permission to allow that particular connection to work with this particular module. So this is important to understand that modules use or utilize different, might utilize different scopes. And that definitely only for OAuth connection. For API keys, you don't have any scopes, nothing. It just works as is. You just create it and done. And now we can go to our connections section where we can see how the connection works. So that's a Google connection, for example, right? And you see this icon here. And this is exactly what shows us what scopes, what are scopes using our Make connection. So as you see in this case, it's out just the user info email and just a mail Google.com. So these are two scopes for different services that they are different, definitely look differently and named differently. But the idea is that icon shows you the scopes that you provided access to or authorized your connection to work. You also have three buttons here. This is definitely just remove the connection. You will need to enter the confirmation, and if that connection used in a scenario, you will be asked also like this. So this is actually one of the tricks to find what exactly scenarios uses this connection, right? And you will see that this and this and this and this connection used this scenarios use this connection. So are you sure you want to remove this? And that also, as you see, allows you to go exactly to this scenario. So that's how you may find which exactly scenario uses that particular connection. You may verify this connection. This just checks it if it exists, or reauthorize it. That will require you again go through this process of the authorization. I just have a lot of windows open. So that's how it works. What happens when connection is created and when you provided your sensitive information such as token, API keys, and so, or you created OAuth connection, which just requires from you the consent on a consent screen. The secret information will be stored in Make, and you won't be able to access it anyhow anymore. So you can just delete connection, reauthorize it, verify it, or rename the connection label. So you just say just Alex2 or something. Just change this name for this connection, and this how connection label, we call this label, will appear in your dropdown. So if I go to any of these Google Drive, for example, or any like Google module, right? So that's, I will see Alex2 connection in here, right? And that that's how it works in the Make relating to connection. So this is the basic that you need to know for now, and later we'll talk more about the connections in Make. So our next topic will be the webhook, and as you see, I have a ton of these webhooks in here, and that's exactly what we're going to learn right now is how to use these webhooks. So for this, I'm going to go and create, let's just take the webhook connection, sorry, the webhook scenario with just one webhook. So several things you need to know about the webhooks in Make. So first of all, the make has a rule, one webhook per one scenario. So previously, if you have used the Integromat, you need to remember and understand that webhooks, there's actually same section here, and they are pretty much similar to what you just seen in the connections, right? So list of webhooks. You will see the URL of this webhook. Also, you will be able to see the several buttons here. One of them is edit, then scenarios. So this, what exactly scenario uses this webhook? Again, you remember we can use one webhook only per one scenario, so it's will lead you directly to that. The option edit will allow you to change the webhook settings right in here. We'll talk about this. This is just enable, disable webhook. So that's activates or deactivates. It's actually for scenario. So this is the activation for scenario. This shows you a queue. We will talk about this and delete. So let's go back to our scenario and let's start with a webhook. So what you should remember that you create the one webhook per scenario. So when you will start, you won't have anything here, and you will need to create the webhook, right? And if as soon as you save it for that scenario and you will start another scenario, no webhooks will be available here. I have these webhooks only because, so you see, I just not use them anywhere. I just call them remove, remove, remove. But if I, for example, will use this test webhook here, and it's actually used, right? And then I will start another scenario. Just let's build another scenario. So you remember I use this test webhook. So I start a new one with the same webhook module. So to copy it maybe. So custom webhook module will literally won't show us this test webhook anymore, right? Because it's already used. And this is the rule that you need to remember. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my webhook scenario and let's talk about the options. So you remember we can edit the webhook in webhook settings here, or the particular webhook I just select can edit from this one. Same pop-up, same window, will almost the same besides the webhook name, right? Will appear when you create a webhook. So I'm just going to use existing one. And here are several options that you may set. So IP restriction, that's obvious. So this will be a list and it should be delimited by comma. The list of IP addresses that literally can call these webhooks or send information to it. The rest will be just ignored. This for security, right? The data structure, this data structure that you pre-select to like a validation incoming data. Okay, so usually if you don't need to validate incoming data, it will be just always empty because we technically will grab anything that comes. Then we have a request header, so that will pass or not pass by default no a headers that comes to webhook, because this usually will be post or get request. Anyways, it has the headers, right? And you will allow either allow or not allow to pass the headers through. Same for method, it will just show you post get, for example, type of a call that hit webhook, and we have this JSON pass through that works for passing the complete JSON without parsing it. Okay, and now let's start to play with our webhook. So I'm going to copy the address of it and just to test. And so what you need to remember when you start with a webhook, and let's say use set variable, and let's give it some name, some proper name, test. It's proper name, right? So as you may see here, my system has no idea what comes from the webhook, and it's pretty obvious, just because my system has never received the webhooks and never received a data inside this webhook. So what I'm going to do and what I should do is to either go and click redetermine the structure or run the webhook. The webhook will ask me what exactly I want to do. Not in this case. This is the case just because I actually, my system, in Mac, I have this just paste thing. And this paste, when I copy the URL, it renders it as like a browser. So exactly same thing will happen if I will just open the webhook in URL. So that's why I got the thing in a queue. So it's kind of, my webhook was called already. So as you see, this queue, it's like a list of requests that your webhook got with their payloads. The payload is like data that contains the webhook. So if you open it, it's just empty. And again, so you should remember that if you copied the webhook and paste it in any system that renders it, right, such as email, for example. If you send the link of the webhook in email text, when the user opens the emails, it automatically renders the URL, right, and will call your webhook. That's why you might sometimes get these empty webhooks in a queue. So I'm going to just use it to show you how it works with the processing data, right? So if I will run it, run webhook once, just to test it, as we do is with a scenario module, it will ask me either I want to listen new webhook request or process existing. I will select process existing. That will process existing will be empty just because we haven't sent any information, even no URL parameters. So that now it's empty. Next time when I will run it, it will just run and will continuously wait until I will send a data to it. So I'm going to open the webhook and using URL parameters, just a question mark, and then parameter equal something with a key value pairs. So if you're not familiar with this at all, it's super simple and similar to, first of all, our JSON, which is a bit complicated, definitely, right? In a JSON, you have double quotes and thing like this, right? So key value pair here in URL parameters, or URL encoded to be precise, that will look like this. Just question mark to start the parameters, then parameter name, then equal sign, and then value of it. So test. Let's do like a name equal Alex. This is exactly to show you encoding thing. And after that ends, instead of adding comma as we would do in JSON after the we have enumeration of parameters, we use here ampersand. So that is symbol shows like and something. So name and then email equal to, and I will put Alex and kind of this, right, mail.com. So what will happen in this case? My Chrome should render it properly and convert it to a special character. Because you remember I corrected myself to saying that is URL encoded parameters. So what you need to remember and understand that in URL, the URL should not contain some special characters, such as at, right? For this, you may quickly Google like a URL encode or decode, depending on the direction. In this case, we encoding the URL, right? So this, which usually comes up for me. So it's mere web, something like this usually comes up for me. I use it, and then if we go to our webhook and place where we build the URL, so that's something that we're going to see. So here we have the @ sign, right? So what I need to do, I need to copy this parameter only and put in here and click encode. So that will encode my value, and that allows me to have it correct. So that is correct implementation and correct encoding for So you will learn them one day probably. So you will remember like %40 means @ %20 means space, and so because your URL can't contain spaces, for example, it will be considered just as this, and this will be considered just as a trash. Won't be parsed by the webhook, for example. So that is, but what you need to remember that your Chrome might do it for you automatically. So don't you just don't rely on a tool, and don't think it's a Chrome search bar. No, not all tools will do it for you. So that's how it works. So if we will try to encode equal, you will get this, and this won't be correct because we don't need to encode the equal sign. We just need to have these guys encoded. So just remember this. Okay, and let's do a test. So I literally hit enter to send my parameters. So you see I got them here, and you see my browser says me accepted. That's why like why it happened, why we see the accepted. That's because the make itself automatically, the make webhook will send back to the browser 200 code and accepted. Should you see the 200 here in the console? Doesn't show in the console, but should show us in the network. So it shows us 200 code status back, right? And that's it. And it shows us preview accepted. It's just default response of make server. To customize your response, you have to use the webhook response, another module, if you want to send something different. But let's finish with our parameters. As you see, we got these guys here, right? And them are like a name and Alex. So these are URL parameters. They call the URL parameters, and then they can be passed inside the URL. If you want to send something more complex, you need to form post request, and we will going to talk about it. But first, let's respond back our browser with something proper. To do so, you need to, first of all, you can change the code. If you just send the information back, the 200, it's a default response of the server. You may read actually about the server response. It says here, so HTTP request codes. On the Mozilla page, we'll give you exact and full explanation of the codes that you have. So HTTP response status codes will explain you that 200 something is good, 300 something it's a redirection, 400 it's a usually error client, and 500 it's a server client. So error client, it's something bad on your end. Not only your, but in most cases it's kind of because of wrong request, and 500 in most of the cases it's because something wrong on a server where you send the request. Because this is not the topic of this course, and not this at all. I won't go super deep in HTTP requests so far. So just learn it if you want. And same Mozilla HTTP response status codes. So our goal here is to respond something back. Let's start with the text and let's do just the test. So the browser should read it and should interpret this well and give us as a test. So as you see, it shows as a test. What you need to remember that you can send a piece of HTML back. So I can do HTML generator, for example, and I use this guy usually, just HTML online, Sometimes it's a little bit weird, but yeah, it's okay. So as you see, you can just build whatever HTML you want. I will just copy this guy. Oops. I will just copy this. We'll try to paste in my webhook and send it back. So you will see what will happen if we will do this by default without additional parameters. Okay, so just okay, run the webhook, run this again. And my browser, again, is just because it's Chrome and it kind of guess what you send it back. So it kind of helps you a bit, but usually you have to proper supply your response. So it should not be just a body, but you should have a header with a content type. And this is important because when we speak about a JSON, this is vital to let your server understand that you send a JSON. Okay, so you should provide the content type header, content type header with proper values. Again, guess what? You can Google the content type, and same Mozilla will give you a ton of explanation about it. So content type, HTML forms, let me see, content type, specification. HTTP. Yeah, so something like this will perfectly show you what can be done with the text, with the multi-parts, with the images, audio. It's like a lot of more of them, but usually we will work with the several of them. And also another tip for you to find the content type correctly if you lost, you can always use HTTP module that we're also going to use shortly. So make a request, and if you go to type, you will see a row and a couple of more guys that will give you text, plain, JSON, XML, text, and HTML also, and so on. Okay, let's do another response, and let's play with filters in here. So we create some kind of a web server in this case that replies back with the different options, and let's try to test it out. So we have some parameters, right? And we have options to respond. So just assume here will be some useful information on this. And let's assume our browser, or let's put it correctly. So content type, correct for the HTML will be text /HTML. We'll just copy this to not type it again. And in here, what I want to do, I want to redirect my browser to another page. So just open this URL and let's send us somewhere else, such as web like a bit.ly or something URL shortener. So for this, we need to change and do not use the content type, but the header will be location. And here you should put the complete URL on the place where you want to relocate. So for example, https and google.com. Okay, so I'm going to relocate it, and what I need to do is to add a code. So you remember we have the code 301 for redirect. So 301 and 302, it's a permanent, like move it permanently, and 302 is like a found. So whatever you choose, both of them will redirect. So 301, location, and URL. And I want to say, like, if the guy who queries this URL open, like literally the one who opens this URL will be Alex, right? Then I will give them this HTML, right? So some page that I generate for him. So name will be Alex. Go this way. And filter will have several options, such as fallback. Means in all other cases, it will just go this way. So fallback for my filter will be redirect to Google. So if it's not Alex, it's just will lead to different page. So we'll save it, run it, and let's just I will copy this URL again because I want to save it. That will trigger my as you see, just triggered my scenario. I was not intended to do it, so I'm just going to try to change the name to, let's say, Sam, and see what happened. So my browser was redirected accordingly to our rule, right? Our fallback, because that was not executed. I got a fallback. I got this module executed, and my browser was redirected to this page. Okay. So I want to show you one more thing, more practical, right? Because that's just how Webhook works. And that you can literally build something more useful, not just these simple things. This will be kind of small server for the Stripe. Yeah, just like this. So I'm just going to copy this code. So you see 200, nothing more. We are returned back to the browser. So if I just paste instead of this dummy HTML, I put something useful, which literally a piece of a Stripe code. So this is a Stripe payment form. So what I'm going to do in here, I will with this URL, it will generate for me the payment form. So guess what will happen if I will enter my URL with the correct parameter, name of Alex, right? That will send me to this code, and that code is literally a Stripe page which generates for us a payment page. So you got the shop. So you remember this example, right? So that's how it works. I showed you before in initial video, an intro on what you can do. So that's exactly it. And that can be used in many ways, such as for example, some affiliate system or so, right? So because this uses only URL, nothing more. So you see you have some parameters, and this is pretty common, comes from also UTM parameters. So like if you open whatever it will be, even same Google, right? With the some search will give you a ton of URL parameters. So you see a search, then we have a queue, which is query. That's what we entered here. And all this thing, it's a ton of parameters that Google sent for its own. So these parameters of your browser, of the version of it, of some source ID, so where it comes from, the encoding of the page, UTF-8, and so on and so forth. So you can use, as I mentioned, these URL parameters and that type of thing, for example, for some affiliate system. So you can just track the URLs that comes to particular thing, right? So and create your own bit.ly or something that will track the clicks that made on this webhook. You can create some active link in email, right? And send the, for example, user to payment page just in here and so on, and track how many times and when the customer opens this URL. So you can even put the SMS on it, and as soon as the customer opens the URL, let's say the PDF proposal, you can call them immediately and just surprise them, say like, okay, I just decided to call you because you probably just opened the proposal, so maybe let's get it signed and paid. And so let's quickly touch base on the things that we can do with the HTTP module and it's my temp, okay, and the webhook. So just to show you more advanced options on how you can utilize your webhook, will be make a request. So HTTP make a request, basic module, and we going to send more advanced parameters to our webhook. So I have my webhook actually in my buffer, so we'll just paste it here. I can clean the parameters, right? So we don't need them anymore because we're going to do a post request. That was when you open the URL, it's just a get. So we're going to send a post request and with a body in it. So body will be row, and then we select JSON. So, and now here you should be kind of like at home because you know the JSON, right? And you can say, okay, I want to send the parameter Alex, and the name of it will be, the name will be Alex, right? The email of my Alex will be alex@gmail.com. So all fine, all good, right? And I will also, to illustrate you one more thing, we'll add, let's say, a phone. So let's assume my Alex has a phone parameter plus something. Okay, so that's a super common question. Like, I got my webhook, but I don't have a parameter in it because the parameters might change, right? And the structure of the data that Webhook receives is changing. It changes, right? So I may say the username, I may say the user email, I may say the phone, and until I will send this data, my system won't have any idea of these parameters, how they exist. Because you know how to build the parameters, you technically can do it and can call them, right? So you can say like one and then your name or any parameter, let's say a phone and something, and then you see it's not filled just because system has no idea that this parameter exists yet. I will just set some variable to test it out, remove this filter, set variable, call it test, put the variable in here. So that should return my phone in a value of it, and we'll run it. So that filter will fail just because there is no name in my request anymore. I renamed it, right? Then so this filter failed. It won't be passed. So we will got our default or fallback option, and my browser potentially, because I don't use browser anymore, should be redirected to Google. So I will just get the information from this webhook response. So I'll run my module. So I send the browser, I send a request. So let's see what we've got. We actually got this page, which says us about the Google, right? So we were redirected to Google. If we will disable auto follow redirects, that will be something like this. So you see, this just accepted because it was not executed. We're going to listen new and run this again. So I got 301. This is our redirect, right? So this is our redirect, and that thing, because this is just a buffer of a text, we haven't specified a type, you remember, intentionally, right? So we don't have a type. So the Google was the one who determined for you that this will be the URL of something, right? By default, the system will receive kind of thing that has to be somehow encoded, and that's why it's important to have the content type header, content type, and here will be text, let's say HTML, or just a text HTML will be fine. So text plain, whatever, text plain or text HTML will be okay. So, and with this one, I will already see the URL. So I will run it again. To listen new, we'll run this, and let's see what we've got. So 301 data, maybe it just becomes a redirect, or I just text HTML. Let's try plain. It should return me the correct URL technically. No, it just returns it then in the headers, because we have allocation. So then it, server literally won't respond to us. We have this just in location because we have the header set, right? And we have this in location. So we determine where we redirect from the location. It's a totally different story, not related to our webhook too much. It's more about the HTTP request itself. And here we got this system done. And meanwhile, check our the data that we received. So you see right now, our webhook has automatically redetermined the structure of variables, name of them and everything, and our variable that we set built here got the data, and everything works just fine. So that, guys, were almost everything about the webhooks that you need to know for now. So that's basically it. We also learned how work filters, right? So just to say, we have a different type of filters. So you to remember, I don't see specific reason to stop on that particular filter and test each rule of these guys, right? So we will learn them during our journey. So what you need to understand, that when you compare the things in a filter, you have to select a proper type of a data that you compare. So if you use exist, does not exist, that will determine if thing exists or not. If you use a text operator, we assume that you use either text in your variable, or the system will do whatever it possible to convert it to a type you select, in this case to a text. If you select something and you will try to match it as a numeric, so make sure you have a number, because you need to or format it to a number using functions, and so on and so forth. So filters we will use both with the functions, with our more advanced scenarios in future, but for now this something that what you need to understand about filters and how they work. So see you soon next video, and there we will talk about the scenario executions and cycles.